यह प्यारा बाग खून से सना पड़ा है, धीरे से आना, यह है शोक स्थान, यहाँ मत शोर मचाना. This शोक स्थान, the Jallianwala Bagh, stood witness to a खूनी Baisakhi more than a century ago. It is the shok sthan which is drenched with the blood of many unnamed and named martyrs who were barbarically slaughtered in the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre that took place on the 13th of April 1919. The story of the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre begins much earlier in March 1919, when the Anarchical and Revolutionary Crimes Act, popularly referred to as the Rowlatt Act, was enacted. No dalil, no vakil, no appeal. The Black Bill gave the British autocratic powers to repress the nationalistic upsurge, which was sweeping across the length and breadth of the country. Citizens took to the streets to protest against this draconian law, which was destined to change the course of Indian history. Our story now moves to Punjab, and more specifically to the holy town of Amritsar, where people had cut across boundaries of age, religion, and gender to participate in the nationwide protests. Michael O'Dwyer, the then Lieutenant Governor of Punjab, was extremely skeptical of the protests, and his unease with the prevailing circumstances had converted Amritsar into a virtual fortress in early April. It seemed that the proverbial dark clouds had started gathering in the middle of spring, and events started unfolding at an unimaginable pace. 9th April 1919. On the day of Ram Navami, Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims walked with their arms entwined in the processions. This was a united India and a united Amritsar, which not only made the British uneasy but also frightened them. 10th April 1919, Saifuddin Kichlu and Dr. Satyapal, the two brave men who were leading the protests from the front, were arrested and deported to Dharamshala. As news of their arrest spread, a huge but unarmed crowd gathered at the civil lines cantonment to make inquiries. In the confusion that ensued, the British opened a volley of fire on the people. Over 25 Indians were martyred and many more were injured. Amritsar was now besieged by rumors and rage. Angry mobs burnt down some official buildings and attacked British civilians. At least 5 British men were killed. A mob also tried to assault a British lady, Miss Sherwood, who was saved through the intervention of an Indian family. The dice had been cast. Over the next 2 days, an enraged, frightened, and uncertain British administration blew events out of proportion. Soldiers were called in to secure the railway line. Telephone and telegraph lines were cut. Brigadier General Reginald Dyer was called into Amritsar with soldiers and ammunitions to suppress what was feared by the British to be an 1857 type of situation. De facto martial law was imposed in Amritsar. The bazaars were shut, a plane was seen hovering in the skies, and even a flag march was conducted. All public gatherings and protests were banned, but there were adequate reasons to believe that not everyone was aware of this ban or was adequately informed of it being in existence. 13th April 1919, Sunday, the auspicious day of Baisakhi, a day that is generally reserved for prayers and celebrations, but today it was a different Baisakhi. While there was hardly any revelry, people had been informed through word of mouth and handbills that there would be a peaceful meeting in the evening at Jallianwala Bagh. The Jallianwala Bagh was merely a 10 minutes walk from Harmandir Sahib Ji. A largely barren and desolate piece of land, it had been the focal point of many protests and gatherings. The Bagh was characterized by a low well and multiple exits that led to small narrow lanes. On that fateful day, however, the door behind the well had been shut, and that had made egress even more difficult. Unsuspecting, unarmed, and innocent civilians started streaming into the Bagh in the late afternoon. There were young men and boys, old men and infants, and a few women. There were Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims. There were people from all walks of life. As per estimates, by around 4:30 p.m., almost 15,000 to 20,000 Indians had gathered at the Bagh. Dyer and his strike force arrived in a cavalcade of 4 vehicles to enter the Jallianwala Bagh. The lane that led to the main entrance was too narrow for the vehicles to pass through. Dyer and his men, who were equipped with a combination of machine guns, rifles, and knives, climbed down. The drivers were asked to block the main entrance, and the column marched inside. Without any warning, the butcher of Amritsar issued the unprecedented order. 50 soldiers opened indiscriminate, non-stop firing by a technique called the Mad Minute until they ran out of ammunition. The firing lasted for only about 10 minutes, but unleashed one of the most horrible massacres in modern history. At least over 1,000 people were brutally killed and over 15,000 were injured. Amritsar was devastated. The city with the proverbial pool of Amrit was now filled with streams of blood. The barbaric atrocities did not end with the firing. Curfew was imposed. Families could not reach their loved ones. There was no water, no electricity, no medical help. The wails of the martyred, the injured, and their families still reverberate through eyewitness accounts. The tears that started flowing on Khuni Baisakhi will never dry. Post the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, martial law was imposed in Punjab. People were wounded, whipped, and jailed. Inhumane and bizarre crawling orders were issued in the lane in which Miss Sherwood was assaulted. No one knew what was happening in Punjab and Amritsar, and only few newspapers like the Bombay Chronicle dared to report the massacre. After a huge outcry, the British held an enquiry into the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. The Hunter Commission report, the details of which were not made available for decades, exonerated Reginald Dyer in 1920. He was merely reprimanded. An isolated and sick Dyer died in 1927. The other chief architect of the Amritsar massacre, Michael O'Dwyer, was assassinated in London by the great revolutionary Sardar Udham Singh in 1940 to seek partial retribution for this heinous crime. An episode without precedent or parallel. An extraordinary event, a monstrous event. An event which stands in singular and sinister isolation. An event that amounted to manslaughter. The event that changed the course of India's freedom movement. Rabindranath Tagore returned his knighthood while Gandhiji returned his many medals. By the summer of next year, the Indian National Congress had decided to withdraw its support for the reforms of the British Empire. The non-cooperation movement had been launched, and the valiant revolutionaries had stepped on the gas against the atrocities of the British Raj. The struggle for Swarajya entered a new and decisive phase and finally led to India's independence in 1947. While we will never know how many people were martyred on the Khuni Baisakhi of the 13th of April 1919, we do know that their supreme sacrifices did not go in vain. कुछ कलियां अध खिली यहाँ इसलिए चढ़ाना, करके उनकी याद अश्रु के ओस बहाना, यह सब करना किंतु यहाँ मत शोर मचाना, यह है शोक स्थान बहुत धीरे से आना।